Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce's Ukraine War News Update, second part thereof for the 7th of November 2023. Before we go to where I normally start in this second news video, which is the military aid and affiliated subjects, I just want to return to something I mentioned in my first news piece, which was a strike on Taganrog. Taganrog is a city on the Azov Sea, just inside the Russian border, not far from Donetsk and not far from Mariupol. Right. What has happened? Well, an airbase there's been some explosions at the airbase there. So what is air defense do? What air defense doing, which is a kind of a meme sentence these days? Air defense did not work, but the Russian military fulfilled its tasks in Taganrog, according to a Russian source. So I'm answering a number of questions received here on the channel about the loud sounds of the residents of Taganrog, and as I've heard today about 10 o'clock in the morning, air defense systems did not work, but please take into account that the armed forces of the Russian Federation constantly carry out tasks of engaging fire units of the armed forces of Ukraine in accordance with the plan for conducting the air defense. I've already said many times the military is fulfilling its tasks and we can help them without panicking and trusting only sources of information. So air defenses didn't work, but hey, nothing to worry about. According to preliminary information, there was a smoking accident at Taganrog Air Base, and this was, widely reported. It's very loud in the Rostov region from the field. They report the arrival near the airfield. Our military birds were there. Smelly ATACMs again? Question mark. That's from a Russian source. And then a bit of Russian cope here. At Taganrog, a Ukrainian missile was shot down near the military airfield and an explosion was heard within the city, Izvestia reported with the reference to a source. As a result of the explosion, containers that were being prepared for loading at the airfield were damaged. The IL-76 aircraft located on the runway was not damaged, the source explained. There is no official confirmation of this data. Residents of the Russian region posted videos on social networks showing plumes of smoke in the distance. Right. Why this is important is as follows. Tendar says, a German source here says, in reference to the events at Taganrog Air Base, Brady Afric reported that so he's a guy that maps all the trenches and looks at, for example, he's looked at the Berdiansk satellite imagery when there were helicopters based there, etc., etc. He reported that parts of the Russian chopper fleet were repositioned to this location, that would be from Berdiansk. Russia has been banking on Ukraine not using Western missiles against an airbase on Russian soil. Unfortunately for them, Ukraine has other means to accomplish that. However, this is another reminder how much Russia relies on Western indecisiveness, partially still falling for Russia's posturing and empty threats. All Russian military targets, whether inside or inside Ukraine or outside, are legitimate targets, period. Russia would have been long defeated if the West would have stopped tapping the brake. It is time to remove all constraints and reservations, he says. And I would tend to agree here. That's my opinion. So Taganrog is there. That is 121 kilometers to the front line. We've heard variously that Ukraine has missiles and drones that can strike, drones striking up to 1,000 kilometers, as according to them. So Taganrog, I think, is genuinely in range of Ukrainian munitions. Whether the US and the UK and France and allies give permission for their own munitions to be used into Russia or not. And this is really significant. So I'm very interested to see what has been hit at Taganrog, if anything. I mean, maybe it is just air defenses shooting down missiles at the airfield, or maybe it is something more significant for the Ukrainians. We'll wait to see. Right, going on to military aid. Zelensky, in his evening address last night, stressed that the budget resources should be directed not to paving stones or street repairs, but to help the defense. So we've seen recently there have been these protests in different Ukrainian cities with regard to the use of money. They're protesting against corruption, but they're also, I think, putting their foot down about money needing to go to the armed forces, rather than protesting that, hey, we should, it's not all about the armed forces. How about we have, services and this and that? No, it's gone the other way. Quote, I expect specific answers from all relevant structures and authorities regarding the tasks that our state is objectively facing now, the president said. In addition, he noted that elections are now not for this time, as I reported earlier. Now, talking about Germany, Taurus and missiles, that can go a good distance, and these are 500-kilometer missiles. The German government is still undecided on whether to supply long-range Taurus missiles to Ukraine. I'll tell you who's not undecided. That's Ukrainians and all of their allies that aren't in the German Ministry of Defense and the German government. It's a bit like ATACMS with Biden. I want to know what the rationale is here. So there will be reasons, right? He's not just going, oh, do you know what? Let's not do it. All right, there's going to be a reason. Is it genuine worries about escalation? Is it worries that they don't have too many of these? There aren't a lot of Tauruses, and these are very useful missiles still for the German Ministry of Defense, as in it will be part of their strategic planning and military planning. So giving 50, 100 of these Taurus missiles out will seriously degrade Germany's own capabilities. But do you know what? They can be built. So, what is the reason? Anyway, this was announced by the head of German Defense Ministry, Boris Pistorius. Quote, I don't think that the missiles will be a game changer. ATACMS, they won't be a game changer, but those types of missiles have been a game changer. So I think Storm Shadow and Scalp have been game changers, as I've talked about before. And they will be running short of these. And so therefore, Taurus will... they have a greater range, arguably, than the Storm Shadow and Scouts, but other than that, they're essentially the same sort of thing. So it's not going to change the game, I don't think. No, he's right, but the whole thing, this whole category was a game changer. So you're just helping with the supply of that game-changing munition. ATACMS, which was handed over to the US, from the US, has a range of 160 kilometers. Taurus 500 kilometers. It's a completely different system. Yeah, give it over. It would be what I would advocate. And Ben Hodges says, not urgent. The Ukrainians have recently proven the concept of making Crimea untenable for Russian forces with just a few Storm Shadows. Imagine if Ukraine had Taurus and ATACMS, Russian logistics in Jankoy could no longer support Russian defenders. Absolutely true, Ben Hodges. He's a massive advocate, as we know, of Ukraine taking Crimea, but initially taking it in the sense of Russians leaving because it's untenable. And you do that with distance munitions. That's what I keep talking about. Long range strikes on targets all the time, consistently. And for that, they're going to need Taurus. Right. I've kind of talked about this previously with regard to the Krinky events taking place. But Trent Telenko here says, or quoting, at the moment, Russia has lost all the tanks that were in my sector at a distance out to 25 kilometers. First-person view drones destroy any vehicle. So I could have put this in my first video this morning about losses, but just in terms of making drones and how important drones are and aiding Ukraine with drones, or United 24, an army of drones, so important. As Trent Telenko says, this is amazing. So this is a quote from a Ukrainian military person in the area. It marks another increase in the range of Ukrainian FPV drones and its supplementation and replacement of 155mm guns, something I talked about earlier, which is for some Ukrainians, the drones are replacing artillery. So this is a quote from the AFU Marine in full now, officer, about the situation on the left bank of Kherson. The Ukrainians are less interested in real estate than it is in destroying the enemy's logistics and ability to fight. Quote, our FPV drones work very well. The Russians can no longer deliver BC, ammunition, evacuate people, etc. I saw with my own eyes one destruction of a car on the way back and one as they flew into the apartment. At the moment, Russia has lost all the tanks that were in my sector at a distance out to 25 kilometers. FPV drones destroy any vehicle. It's just incredibly important for how the Ukrainians will be able to get a foothold on the left bank of the Kherson. And it's then down to the provision of these drones consistently. It's what United 24 is doing. It's what lots of allied nations are doing. And Ukraine are ramping up their own production of these pieces of kit. Okay, in Tokyo, during the meeting of the G7 countries, the creation of an air defense shield for Ukraine should be discussed. And that's what the German Foreign Ministry said. I mean, yes, this is good that Germany, having just seen Boris Pistorius annoyingly announce that Tauruses aren't yet going to Ukraine, but they are saying that air defense shields should be discussed. Yes, G7 meeting should be discussing Ukrainians' needs. It is still top of my agenda. Of course, it should be the top of the international agenda still. I know Israel and Palestine has strangled some of the bandwidth and other things are going on. And there's war fatigue, but it's so important not to let this slide. And if allied nations can help with the air defense, particularly over what will be a very demanding winter for the Ukrainians, then that will be incredibly important. Right, Canada has transferred 6 robots to Ukraine for remote mining of territories, according to State Emergency Service. Thanks to the wireless and wired connections, the work can operate for up to 5 hours and perform various tasks, remotely destroying explosive objects or conducting reconnaissance of the area. I mean, these are really useful bits of kit, and it's good to see that Canada has helped out with 6 of those. You can indeed see a video here with dramatic music, always useful. So these are hopefully good bits of kit that will help Ukrainians to demine whilst also playing PlayStation by the looks of it. That was a genuine PS5 controller. I know, I've bought a couple. Children. And so again, it's that interplay between modern tech and gaming, really, and allowing people who have got intuitive understanding. Well, that's intuitive understanding of how to use those controllers and transferring those skills across to stuff like this. They're also practical and ergonomic and whatnot. Anyway, good stuff from the Canadians there. Okay, moving on. Prime Minister of Slovakia, Robert Fico, who opposes military aid to Ukraine, clarified the new government will not prevent Slovak companies from producing and supplying weapons to their customers, including in Ukraine. Interesting moral positioning there. It's saying politically and morally, my government does not support weapons to Ukraine. But if our companies want to build them and make money off that, then that's fine. It's a bit odd there. I see something of a moral contradiction. I think there's double standards at play there. But I don't agree with them not helping Ukraine politically in the military sphere. Anyway, moving on. This is apparently the first image of a US-supplied M1A1 Abrams tank reportedly on Ukrainian soil. Interestingly, the paint job is not the usual Ukrainian paint job. It is in fact the same, by the looks of it, as the Polish Abrams paint job. Now, whether this is indeed a Polish tank in Poland and not in Ukraine, or whether it's that Ukraine have actually received Polish Abrams and Poland are getting back for, I don't know, or whether it's had the same paint job as the Polish tanks. I don't know, but nonetheless, that has been pointed out. I thought I'd tell you. Okay, stockpiles of missiles in Russia for a distance of more than 350 kilometers amount to quite a lot. 870 apparently. Well, here's an infographic. This is Russia continues to accumulate missiles for future massive air attacks on Ukraine. As of November, Russia has 870 high precision missiles, 290 Iskander-M and Iskander-K. These are ballistic or cruise missiles. These often don't get shot down. Calibers and some of these ones do, but then you have the anti-ship missiles and the Kinjal that can be shot down by, say, Patriot, but generally get through elsewhere. So there is starting to be a stockpile of missiles that is looking ominous for Ukraine, and I expect to see these flying through the air over the next few weeks. That would be my opinion. Military intelligence of Ukraine does not currently record the active movement of Shahed drones from Iran to Russia. This was stated by Vadim Skibitsky, a representative of the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communications of Ukraine. Skibitsky noted that Tehran has already fulfilled the first concluded contracts with Moscow for the supply of ready-made kamikaze drones, so now it can only be about small batches of drones and components for them. At the same time, according to him, the Russian Federation partially started the large-scale production of Shahed drones in the territory of the Republic of Tatarstan. This is the worry that Ukrainians now have. It's not so much about Iran exporting these drones to Ukraine in large numbers, but it's about to Russia in large numbers, but it's about Russia constructing their own, and they are still a big nuisance for the Ukrainians. All right, Russia has formally stated that Wagner no longer exists. Chairman of the Parliament Defense Committee, Andrei Kartapolov, said, quote, "It's been completely disbanded. Most of the fighters are in the process of moving to other structures." Days ago, Prigozhin's son was said to head Wagner, so it's going to be called, I presume, something different. It'll exist in some iteration, but essentially all of Wagner will be under, in one way or another, the auspices of the Russian government. The MOD will control Wagner, and as I reported this morning, taking over their economic interests in places like Africa, because obviously Russia needs that. They don't need Prigozhin dipping into the pot before, or Wagner dipping into the pot before that money gets to Russia, as was probably previously the case. I mean, Russia would have been making money, but just not as much with Prigozhin's hand in it, in that process. Now it appears that these private military companies are nothing more than Russian proxies, much more directly, and not even proxies, just Russian armed forces. You know, what's the difference of the Russian MOD having a private military company or its or the army? What is functionally or meaningfully the difference? They are paying a bunch of people to do. The difference will only be in like your benefits. It makes no difference to the people they're attacking. So Russian MOD PMCs are the Russian MOD. End of. So therefore, every time Russia is doing something in Africa, that is the Russian government directly, and there's no excuses for it. It's not like the governments are paying some private entity. They're paying the Russian government to do that. Therefore, it's the Russian government doing that. Right. Talking about money and assistance. This is a great memo clarifying the facts about US aid to Ukraine, expertly debunking myths with a direct approach. I might turn this into a separate video as well, just as a reference video. Written by Luke Coffey for the US think tank Hudson Institute. Here are the key points from 14 facts about US aid to Ukraine. So the US is not writing blank checks to Ukraine, and most of the money allocated to help Ukraine never leaves the US. About $70 billion of authorized aid for Ukraine stays in the US, backing the top-tier defense industry and generating well-paying jobs in 38 states. There has never been more accountability for US military assistance than what is available for Ukraine aid. After Russia's invasion, the US government formed the Ukraine Oversight Interagency Working Group with over 160 officials and 20 federal agencies overseeing US aid. No one's complained about US aid going decades back, right? That has been given out by the bucket load around the world, right? No one's batted an eyelid. And as soon as Ukraine happens, everyone's like, oh, we want transparency. Yeah, and there is loads of transparency, but just be aware of the double standards that are at play there. For a modest amount of money, US aid helped Ukraine dismantle Russia's armed forces without a single American firing a shot or being shot at. Up to 300,000 Russian troops have been killed or wounded in Ukraine, and the original invasion force from February 2022 doesn't exist. It doesn't exist anymore. It's been attrited. A victorious Ukraine means a safer Taiwan. In the words of Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, quote, "The security of the Indo-Pacific region is inseparable from European security. European stability, which Russia is trying to undermine, affects the American worker. The US and Europe are each other's biggest export markets in 2022. 45 out of 50 states, including California, the largest single state economy, shipped more goods to Europe than to China. The lessons the US learns from Ukraine will make America stronger in the Indo-Pacific. Supporting Ukraine revealed existing flaws in the American defense industry, which the US is now addressing. Fortunately, these issues come to light when the US was not engaged in a war. Ukraine is not a new forever war. Ukrainians don't seek or desire US troops to fight Russia. They simply request resources, which the US can readily supply. It claims that US aid to Ukraine costs $900 per American household, and that the proposed aid will add over $1,000 to the tax burden of every family of four in America are highly misleading. These figures mislead since federal income tax is not uniformly applied to households, so on and so forth. So, I mean, that is just some of that headline stuff from that report. I'll look at that report, the original source, and discuss it. Now, I just want to refer to a comment from one of my videos yesterday from Kev here, who thanks for the comment, even though he heavily criticizes me. It's useful to be criticized so I can present my rebuttal, and that gives rationale for why I think like I do. And he said, "Your excusing and talking up of the EU is getting sickening now. The reality is that the EU, Germany and France have had to be dragged kicking and screaming to support the Ukraine." Okay, first point is, no, the EU wasn't dragged kicking and screaming. The EU is a conglomeration of up to 30 states. And you think, I mean, the issue with them is that they don't do things quickly because you need the agreement of all those states. And actually, they did come to aid Ukraine. But this is one of those, and I pulled up Francis Durney for doing this, which is like, if you're going to say how amazing Poland and, I don't know, Croatia and the Baltic states were in Poland and the Baltic states and some of the Nordic states were in supporting Ukraine early doors, and they say that's wonderful, and then say how rubbish the EU was, and then say how rubbish Germany and France were, and therefore the EU is rubbish. But these are EU states. So you've got to be really careful of how you couch these criticisms, because you can't pick up these European nations and slag off those European nations and say these ones represent the EU, but these ones don't represent the EU when they all represent the EU is a problem. At the beginning of this conflict, if it had not been for the UK and Poland, the Ukraine would have been overrun. Yes, UK and Poland were brilliant and they did a great job, and I've said that, and I've said that many times. And we opened the door for tanks with the Challengers. We opened the door with Storm Shadow missiles. It's brilliant. However, we have also, and this is coming from government sources themselves, taken our foot off the gas recently. We've been overtaken by Germany, and we can talk about the legacy and we can talk about what happened at the beginning of the war, but the important thing is what's happening now. And now Germany are doing really well, Taurus aside, and I will criticize them over not giving Taurus, as I've just done. But Germany are doing a really good job of supporting Ukraine. Why would I want to slag them off? Per capita and GDP, they're doing a better job than the US. They're the best in the world. They're doing better than the UK. Why would I want to moan about them being drag kicking screaming? Yes, that happened, and that was annoying, but now they've turned up, and the fact they've turned up is good. It was Trump that released Javelin to Ukraine. He released it by trying to bribe Zelensky. He tried to bribe Zelensky to give him dirt on Biden. He wouldn't have decided to give Javelin to Ukraine. That would have been the US DOD. So this is, again, it's the same thing as Biden, as with Trump. So, you know, I can neither slag off Trump nor congratulate Trump for giving Javelin as a whole. What I can slag off Trump for is holding them back until he got dirt on Biden. Now that was criminal, in my opinion. Anyway, it was Trump that released Javelin to the Ukraine. It was the UK that supplied the new NLAW systems. Yes. Without them, Ukraine would have been done. Yes. The Polish armour, artillery and ammunition, along with aircraft, was the linchpin. Yes. I've never not said this. Germany and France are trying to paint a picture that they fully supported Ukraine when both Macron and German Chancellor were being duped by Putin. Look at Germany now. I am looking at Germany now, and they're doing better than we are. They might have been duped at the beginning, and Macron might have been trying to be the kingmaker and the peacemaker and whatever. But actually, and Ukraine the latest talked about this recently, actually Macron's completely changed. He's done a 180. Germany's done a 180. It's about where they are now. We were awesome then. We're less good now because arguably because we've got nothing left in the locker. They were rubbish then, and they're good now. Or at least Germany, France, we can have some discussions about because they've got a massive defence industry that probably aren't providing enough stuff through the government. But then they don't announce a lot of stuff, and they do a lot of stuff behind closed doors. There's a lot of satellite activity that they're doing, etc., etc. Same can be said about the UK, of course. They're having to be dragged to supply the more sophisticated Storm Shadow type equipment. Are they, though? I mean, France have supplied some. They haven't. Taurus haven't been supplied yet, and we are criticising them for that. But all the other stuff they have supplied. They are the ones preventing Ukraine from hitting Russian targets in Russia, while the UK told the Ukraine that they can hit any target anywhere with Storm Shadow, which is a sound point. Trying to make out that, although I don't know that that's officially been sanctioned, and I don't think we have seen Storm Shadow be used in Russia. So actually, that might not technically be true. Trying to make, or there was something that Ben Wallace said, I think, that allowed us to think that, and it did seem like that, but I don't know 100% if that's the case, because you would have thought they would have been used already, and they haven't. Trying to make out that Germans and France supply more materials and financial support to Ukraine now, at this moment, is frankly pathetic. Why is that pathetic? I literally don't understand this point. It literally makes no sense. They're helping now, and they're helping more than the UK. That's just a fact. Look at the stats. And those are September stats, and they've done even more since then. Germany have done even more than the UK since then. Arguably, we've run out of stocks, but also Rishi Sunak's not particularly strong on that. Ben Wallace was. Grant Shapps is trying. There's good stuff. The UK's done a really great job, and the Ukrainians really appreciate that. But this shouldn't mean I can't say Germany are doing well. This shouldn't mean, I don't understand. It's like this zero-sum game. It's like, if I say Germany have done well, it means UK's rubbish. No, it doesn't. It means we can both do well. The zero-sum game thinking is counterproductive. It's destructive. This, I can't disagree with this comment anymore. And to call it my views, frankly, pathetic is an unwarranted insult. The UK supported Ukraine with everything it could at the time, yes, when it was critical, and the UK is still training tens of thousands of people, yes, and I report on that all the time. Again, me saying Germany are doing a good job right now is not taking away from any of that. It's just, its intelligence gathering surpasses what the Germans, French, and Polish are capable of. Possibly. You would need to prove that. I mean, that's a big thing, because are you meaning together, those three nations? Intelligence gathering is not as good as UK. May or may not be true, but we don't know what each of those nations are doing in terms of intelligence supplying to Ukraine. So that is just a mere assertion that has no, I don't think, any evidential basis. And to think that Polish intelligence in Eastern Europe is going to be far more capable, I think, in that locale than ours will be. You know, in terms of all the ammunition, all the munitions going through Poland and Germany into Ukraine, and all the intelligence around that, the UK will be less prevalent than those nations in that area. And so therefore, you can talk about how wonderful our intelligence gathering is in, I don't know, the Middle East or Asia or wherever, better than the Polish intelligence gathering, better than the French. I don't know if that's true or not. But in the location of Ukraine, we're at a slight disadvantage to some of those nations. Anyway, I answered that with much of what I've said, but I just want to, you know, I'm hopefully fair. I got attacked by someone else yesterday for not slagging off the UK enough. And here's someone saying, stop slagging off the UK. I don't... Anyway, I'll go on. Rant mode over. Right, geopolitics. EU. Borrell admits conflict in Israel is affecting policy towards Ukraine. In a speech delivered at the 2023 EU Ambassadors Conference, the EU's top diplomat, Joseph Borrell, admitted that conflict in the Middle East is affecting aid policies towards Ukraine. And that is a worry. It's definitely a worry. Deputy Prime Minister says Ukraine expects positive reports on EU membership progress. Ukraine is expecting that, I think, next week. Deputy Prime Minister for European Integration, Ola Stefanishnya, said in an interview with Reuters that is what Ukraine desperately are wanting, of course. Now, Financial Times says, maybe I'm slagging off the UK too much here, 127 UK companies admit breaching Russian sanctions. Wow. Russia sanctions. According to the Financial Times, based on Freedom of Information request submitted to the HM Treasury, 127 UK companies had voluntarily reported sanctions violations against Russia to the UK government. So that's interesting that they've done that themselves. I'll have to look into that story in a little bit more depth to get a bit more information. Scandal in Italy. Has Putin's seized yacht been allowed to sail free? Last spring, Navalny's group reported the $700 million boat was Putin's, and it was seized shortly. This is the boat where it had the crew on board were FSB agents, and it was like, yeah, we don't know who it's registered to, but it's almost certainly Putin. It was seized shortly afterwards under sanctions, but Svoboda Radio says it left a Tuscan port 7 weeks ago. Something shady is going on there. Investigators in France are investigating the possibility that Russia was behind the marking of buildings in Paris with the Star of David, according to reports by several news agencies in France. Now, this could be one of those try and blame the other side thing that we see from Russia so often. It's like, oh, this horrible thing that's happened in France, it's Russia's fault. But actually, there's some good rationale for this. And it would be the perfect thing for Russia to do in terms of their discord in foreign nations. Relatively easy, low-cost thing for them to do that could cause a right ruckus. France is now seriously investigating the possibility, says Michael Horowitz here, that Russia was indeed behind the marking of buildings with David stars in an attempt to destabilize the country. Following the anti-Semitic vandalism, a couple from Moldova were arrested. The couple was arrested and confirmed multiple times during their detention that they took orders from Russia. Last week, 200 stencils were found in several areas of Paris. Hauts-de-Seine, Seine-Saint-Denis. Another couple was identified but has since left the country. Investigators think those two attempts are tied and that the methods point towards a commando operation, per a police officer quoted in the article, and in the sense that it was fast and organised. This might then give France more justification for being strong against Russia. Like Russia, if they are genuinely directly involved in sowing discord in France, which would absolutely not surprise me, then this might end up being counterproductive for Russia. I mean, it's fine if Russia get away with doing that, but if they're caught doing that, this could be France going, right, okay, scouts are doing quite well at the moment. Yeah, another 50 of those are going to Ukraine. Thank you very much, Russia. So it might bite them on the bum. Anyway, let me know what you think. Sorry about my mid-video rant, but actually, it really does annoy me when I think I attack everyone. And I'll tell you what, so someone yesterday said, do you know what? You don't attack Britain enough. So this guy says, stop being harsh at Britain and you should congratulate Britain more. Someone else yesterday said, stop attacking the US, you need to attack the UK more. It's like, why do I criticize when things go wrong in the US more or look at US politics? Well, because actually they're super important. They're a much bigger, more influential country than the UK. We're not living in the times of the British Empire anymore. So America are super important, and my focus on those issues are reflective of that. But also when it comes to support for Ukraine, the UK is in a really different position, right? We have total bipartisan support in our broadly two-party system, but in a 3 to 4 party system, we've still got a multipolar support for Ukraine. We don't have an issue. So if the Tories get beaten by Labour in the next general election, which is looking more and more likely, although the Israel-Palestine conflict might have something to say about that, but there will be no problem for continued support to Ukraine. The Labour Party are just as strong. And so therefore, I don't need to pick apart the politics in the UK. All I might need to say is we're not giving enough, or we might, more money or more equipment needs to be requisitioned or whatever. But generally, we're in the right place. Germany are now in the right place. Now. France, maybe a little bit more, thank you very much. US, they're in the right place, but there's political shenanigans going on that is endangering that continued support for Ukraine. And that is coming from a particular part of the Republican Party. And so, given the US giving so much stuff to Ukraine, it is incumbent upon me to criticize the US when I feel they need criticism, because that is not cool, and that will endanger Ukraine getting the support that they so desperately need. So I think I'm fairly fair with how I give out my criticism. And if you want me to criticise the UK more, check out my writing from the last 10 years. Goodness me, I am critical of the UK government. I'm not a fan of the Conservatives, right? That's just the way I am. Sorry, not sorry. And I've criticised the US. And in fact, I've criticised pretty much every bloody political situation in the world, right? But I'm not going to give love to the UK just because I'm British. And I'm not going to not give respect to the EU or to European nations when they have done really good things, but I will give criticism to them when they haven't done really good things, right? There are 30 odd countries in the EU, up to 30 countries in the EU, and they're all doing slightly different things bilaterally with Ukraine, and some countries need to really sort it out. Greece and even Italy, that's been really strong on rhetoric, but actually when you look at the amount they've given compared to, say, Germany, is way down, given that they're one of the main economies in the world. And so there's lots of criticism to be given. I haven't really criticised the UK, but I'm not going to. I'm just, obviously this is someone who's a Brexiteer who hates the EU, and any chance to slag off the EU is taken, and they can't bring themselves to be positive about the EU ever. I just can't do it. It seems from here, and that then actually flavours any kind of proper evaluation of really what's going on. And I think that's well summed up in that comment. Anyway, that's my rant over. Take care. Speak soon.